Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, welcome everybody. Hi, yes. How cool is this set, by the way, right? I've never moderated a panel with a full set. This is so cool. Anyway, I'm Elizabeth Wagmeister from Variety. I'm so excited to be here. It's the first for-year consideration event for Amazon, so welcome. Now tonight we have a special panel for Amazon's longest running drama, Bosch. The cast and executive producers are here, so get excited for that. Yep. Now, season 3 of Bosch launches this Friday, April 21st, and the full season will be launched, as you know. But today we are screening for you the first episode of season 3, so you'll get to see the premiere. I see some applause in the audience. Yes, it's exciting. Yeah. Now, as you all know, there are so many more people, aside from the actors and the producers, that go into creating a series. So from the cinematographers to the costume designers, to the set designers, to the musicians, there's far too many people to fit onto this panel, but lucky for you, Amazon has put together a one-of-a-kind, really, experience. The Amazon Stream Home, which is here at the Hollywood Athletic Club. We want to make sure that you get to experience. So after the screening and panel, make sure to go through all the floors. There's rooms for all of Amazon's original series. I'm going to read some of them off. So Man in the High Castle. Yep. Z, the Beginning of Everything. Goliath. Sneaky Pete. Mozart in the Jungle. Catastrophe. Transparent. Just Add Magic, and An American Girl Story. So, yes. So there are props, sets, costumes. You'll be able to see it all, but I do have to say the most important rule, as always, is do not touch anything because everything is on loan from these series, but do make sure to explore around and enjoy the food and the drinks and the reception. So I will stop talking and let you watch the first episode, and right after that, we're going to bring out the cast and producers. So enjoy, guys. Thank you. What did you guys think? All right, well, since we're already seated, how about we just go down the line and introduce ourselves?
I think I took Eric's seat, so I'm Michael Connolly. I'm an executive producer.
Eric Overmeyer, executive producer.
They already met me before.
Well, say
You're the star.
do it anyway.
All right, Elizabeth Wagmeister from Variety.
Titus Welliver.
You have to say it again.
Actor.
Lance Reddick. Actor. I'm glad you clarified that. In case I didn't know.
All right, so first of all, I just want to say congrats because season 3 is about to launch, but you've also already been renewed for a 4th season. That's cute. That's very, very very cool. All right, so let's just go way back to the beginning. I want to start off talking to the producers. Michael, just how did the decision come about to finally turn your books into a TV series?
Oh, it was really a question about getting the rights back. I had sold them in the 1990s, and the deal had a really long tail, and it took a while to get for me to get control of the books back. And when I did, television had changed in that period to it was almost like there are many shows that were almost like novels, you know, serialized television, serialized storytelling, and so when I got these books back, and I think it was 2011. I told my representatives that's the direction I wanted to go.
And did you always have in mind that you would want to turn them into a series?
In the 90s it was movies, I wanted to, that was the thing to do. And then the world of television changed so dramatically and became so interesting to me, that's what I wanted to do.
Now, Eric, you adapted these books for television, which I say like this because we're on Amazon. But can you talk about developing the book, how closely you worked with Michael, and some of the challenges?
Very closely with Mike, and he's been very involved from the beginning and to this very day. And it's been a good working relationship. The first challenge was adapting to a television program a series that features a main character who doesn't talk. So that was an issue. In the books, he's very silent, and we're privy to his inner thoughts. But so that we had to do. We also had to. The books date from the early '90s, and we didn't want to do a period piece, so we had to change and adapt some of the backstory for Harry Bosch. So in the books, he's a Vietnam vet. We made him a veteran of the Afghan War, and that sort of thing. In the books, his ex-wife Eleanor is dead, and she's very much alive in the series. So it's very close to the books, but it's a kind of parallel universe. But it's been a real joy.
Now, for the cast, had you read the books or any of the books before you came onto the series?
I had read one of the books many years before, and it resonated, and I enjoyed the book, but I had only read that one book. And then I read the script, and that's the blessing and the curse of when you read something that's so good and you want it so badly, but you don't want it so badly. And so that was the biggest trick for me, because I hadn't read anything even remotely as good as that in so many years. So the story has a happy ending, obviously, but no. So then it was kind of trial by fire, and didn't have a lot of time to really prep. So I asked Mike where I should start. Should I start at the beginning and kind of move through? And there wasn't the time. And he said, I think you should really focus on the books that we were using for the first season. So I read Concrete Blonde, which we used a very small portion of, and City of Bones and Echo Park. And that gave me a lot of insight in how to sort of approach the character.
How about you two? Had you read the books?
I hadn't read the books. I probably just very impolitic, but I didn't know who Michael was at the time. And so when and it's interesting because when I first got the offer, it was just to occur the first season, and I was a little hesitant to play another cop again. And I remember one of the people I called for advice was George Pelicanos, and as soon as he said Michael Connelly, because I guess you guys are friends, but he was like, dude.
We knew you were going to call.
But quite frankly, as simple as it sounds, the main reason I said yes was because Eric Overmyer asked me. First of all, when I got the offer, I didn't realize that there was a note from him, personal note from him attached. And then I spoke to him, and he said, we really need a great actor for this role, and we'll basically write it as great as you want, and you can have as much input as you want. And in this town, you get a lot of promises like that, and you never know what you can believe. But because it came from Eric, I believe.
Never.
Not at Hollywood. But literally because of who Eric is, And then after speaking with Michael, I said yes. And then I read the books, and I was like, wow, this is great.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I read Echo Park, but I stopped there also because there's something about reading the material and then what you read in the book changes in the script, and you kind of leap way ahead of yourself. And the scripts are amazing in itself, so I just stuck to the scripts, and it's developing in a great way.
Now, it's obviously great when you start off with this material that's already there and you have a fan base that is already invested in the story and the characters, but I'd imagine it's also a little bit daunting, knowing that people have their own preconceived notions from, reading the book. They've already imagined what this world looks like. So for the producers, how did you know that Titus was your leading man? And then I also want to hear from you, was it daunting to take on such a known character?
I want to hear what they have to say first.
Michael is very smart. If you go through the books, there's almost no physical description of Harry Bosch. So we weren't, say, saddled with the Jack Reacher problem, where Jack Reacher is described as 6'5" and a monster. So in that way, we were fortunate, and Michael had Titus in mind, I think, from the beginning. But for me, and I think for all of us, when Titus walked in the room, we all went, thank God, because we had not found anybody even remotely right for the part up until then.
Yeah, we wanted to get Titus in from the beginning, but he was making a movie in Hong Kong, so we ended up waiting like 2 months or so before he came in, and he got the job in the room, as they say. And Eric's exactly right. I write the way I read. I like to create in my head what characters look like. So I don't, I think there's 20 Harry Bosch books and probably a total of 500 words spread through there that offer any kind of glimpse of his description. And so it was somewhat of a blank slate, but his internal person is described at length. And so we were looking for somebody who can project the kind of life that Harry's led, and that's what we could see in Titus.
For you, was it daunting to take on this character?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think any time, we create our own idea of what the character looks like and sounds like, and oftentimes it's, what we see is not our own personal realization of the character, and that's hard, and I think it's hard for any actor. It's kind of a fool's errand, but I felt like I understood the character, and so it was just sort of a leap of faith to sort of, right, wrong, or indifferent, to kind of just to jump in and just service it. And it's not like we had to make gigantic leaps from the books. I mean, it ain't broke, so there was no need to fix it, and so it was really just to stay true to the integrity of the character in the book. So I just sort of put my head down and said, well, we'll see what happens. And the responses have been really positive, and a lot of goodwill and support, and obviously I really appreciate that, but you got to do what you got to do.
Right? Well, you did say that the response has been great, and there, aren't numbers released with streaming shows, but this is one of the highest rated of Amazon's just comments and things like that from fans. So from the time that the show premiered to now, you've gone through 2 seasons. For the cast, what have you noticed in the difference of kind of the fans and the reaction now that the show's been on for 2 seasons?
Man, I don't really know how to answer that. I mean, all I know is that when people come up to me, they love the show. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, some people, for me personally, comment about how sometimes Irving seems a little different than in the books. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But other than that, I mean, they love the show. And a lot of the people who come up to me are people who are fans of the books as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much goodwill. It's kind of, the first few times, I kind of went, and that speaks to my, the strength of Michael's books. I mean, the people are dedicated, and they love the books, and they love Harry, and they love all the characters that inhabit that world. I've never had a person come up to me and say, I really like the show, but I don't really care for this, or I don't care for that. It's always so positive, and that's that doesn't always happen.
Right. Now, Lance, you were saying that you were hesitant to play another cop, but something about this show is it's not just another cop show, as they say. So I'm interested to hear from everyone on the panel, just what are some of the reasons you think that this is different than other cop shows that have been on television before?
Wow.
I couldn't hear you because you were turned that way. But are you talking about just Lance's role?
No, just the show in general, just it really is different than other cop shows that we've seen on television. And what do you think makes it that?
Well, I mean, from the beginning, Eric was familiar with the books, so that was from the very first day we all kind of met, and our other producer, Henrik Basten, we said we wanted to keep the reality that's in the books as much as we could make it. And I have real cops, real detectives who help me with my books, and I brought them in as consultants on the show, and they're in the writing room once a week. And so I think this idea of make it real, make it real, make it real, I think translates well. We shoot every shot in LA, that helps a lot. And, our overriding mantra was, it's not a show about how a cop works on the case, but it's about how the case works on the cop. And if we keep that in mind all the time, I think we end up with good storytelling.
Now, something that you just mentioned is the authenticity with the show, that you have real people in the writer's room and consulting. For anyone on the panel, producers and the cast, can you kind of talk about the authenticity of the show and working with these people to make sure that you're giving an accurate portrayal of what's really happening?
Yeah, I just want to add also to what Mike was saying is that our show doesn't follow that kind of framework of, the sort of standard fare of a lot of network shows of procedural police shows. Harry doesn't catch a case at the beginning of an episode and then work the case and then get the guy at the end. I mean, there are times where he'll work an entire case for the entire season and there's not even necessarily a complete resolve in that way. And so watching the show is more like the experience of reading one of Michael's books. I mean, they're really not episodes, they're more like chapters. And Mike and I did a thing on Facebook Live, and somebody was asking sort of specifically, if I haven't seen the first two seasons, does each season stand alone? And they do, as each book stands alone, but I think you're better off sort of, having the backstory and the history of the characters. Obviously, it's going to be a richer experience. Anyway, what was the question?
The question was, I was so enthralled by your answer that I almost forgot. No, it was just, let's talk about the authenticity of the show. And Michael mentioned, having real law enforcement to consult. And what's that experience like to work with those people?
It's been authentic in many ways for me. Well, once Michael and Eric assigned Tim and Mitzi and myself to actually go on a ride along with them and go to the simulator and experience what a detective would go through. That was as authentic as it would get for me, because going through Watts and Compton with Tim and Mitzi and making it all the way back to Beverly Hills is when they caught a case. And I had to hop out and tackle somebody to the ground. I'm joking. But
You're a good actor. I was like, you tell me about that.
You just messed up a perfectly good lie. I was going to back you up.
I know, I was like, okay.
But Tim did, and we were in the car and then we just saw everything just spin into action once we got back to Hollywood. And then he jumped out and went and took care of the situation. And for me, I was able to bring that back to the set, because that's as real as it gets.
I think I read somewhere that you've actually had real cops that appear.
Lots of them.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, Tim and Mitzi recruit their colleagues, and so in a squadron scene or at a crime scene, many of the extras are real cops, real detectives, real crime scene technicians, and it's great. And it's wonderful going around with Mike to LAPD or Sheriff's Department facilities, crime labs. He's like a rock star. It's like being with Mick Jagger, and they've got copies of his books. Sign this, sign this, sign that. It's fantastic, and it's allowed us real access to be able to film in the real Hollywood station and the real LA County Crime Lab.
The real
Cal
morgue.
State.
We've been in the big crypt at the
We've been in the big crypt at the morgue. Oh my God.
This is a
That was
refrigerator that
What was
holds
that
88 bodies.
Yeah.
That was rough.
What was that like?
Well, the bodies that I was looking at in the scene with the coroner obviously were fake, but we were in the morgue, and to access the bays, the dissection bays where we were, you came in through a big cooler, and the bodies were stacked up, and it was interesting because everybody was kind of quiet. I mean, there was some gallows humor, but that was to try to sort of break it up. But it smelled really terrible in there, and they had these giant washing machines and dryers because they wrap the bodies up in sheets, when they bring them in. And I remember we were just sort of standing there watching this dryer, and they just put a whole bunch of bedding in there, or sheets, whatever, and it turned red, and it was just this. It was very surreal. I mean, it looks great on film, but we never went back.
And it's one of those experiences where I was going to go there also. And I reached out to Titus and I said, I'm going to go to the morgue. And he said, that's a smell you'll never forget. And, and it's something that you might not want to consider. You can't do it, of course, for the work, but at the same time, it's going to live with you. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I think lives with them also because it's heavy. Mm-hmm. But that's testament to the team also because, in the first season, I think it was, I was actually a golfer. Mm-hmm. And Jerry Edgar is supposed to be very good at what he does, but not Jamie. And they set it up for me, and they lined it up for me where I can actually go to a golf course and just practice my game over and over again. And I didn't really ask them to do it, but it was just a phone call from Pieta, and he was just like, he's one of the producers, and he said, listen, we set it up for you to go actually knock some balls around as well as go to the morgue or go to the simulator just to make it as authentic as possible.
It didn't help your golf game.
Not at all. I'll still cut the grass.
And yet he was out there.
We had to fix it.
I really got to work on the golf. It's one
Absolutely.
scene. Jamie kept wanting to go back to the golf course.
Over and over again. You can't end it.
So now we get to do some audience Q&A. There's a hand right here, actually. Go right ahead.
I have two questions. One for Michael and one for central character. To you as the main actor, what is the main conflict throughout the show? Central, what are you struggling against? What are you struggling against in terms of your process in that world?
In terms of my process or the character's process?
The character's process.
Well, the character's process,
what is your main that character's main concern?
well, people are, he's surrounded at times by people that are inept. And this is a guy who, no, not Jerry.
No, I know it's not me.
He just
Lance.
smiled really.
I'm not worried.
Did he make a
I
face?
just
Not at all.
Smiles.
My character's cool.
Look, Jerry carries his weight.
He doesn't suffer fools, and people who just sort of do their jobs, that infuriates him because he's a guy who's completely dedicated to that which he does. He's, as Mike says, he's a grinder. And if one was a victim of crime, you would want a detective like Harry Bosch to work the case. He's in a constant state of observation. He takes nothing for granted. And so when he comes into contact with bureaucracy and people who are just sort of doing their time on the job, he seems to constantly be coming up against that and navigating it. And so he sort of circuitously moves around that, which puts him at odds with people. Not to say, and he's not a dirty cop. He's not someone who would plant evidence on someone or who would beat a confession out of somebody. But he'll bend the rules, and certainly you will see in this season his moral compass has become somewhat magnetized, for lack of a better word. But that's sort of the central conflict, I think, because he's a guy who has one speed and he's in a constant state also of forward motion, and he kind of pinballs off of people who are not like-minded. And I think that at times is deeply frustrating.
And how would
Same thing?
Original intent.
Well, I think the show gets at what I want to do in the books, and it's pretty simple. And most of us have not solved murders, and so you got to take something that's almost exotic to us and make it get an empathic connection to it. And so I think it's just a struggle to be a fair man in an unfair world. Harry's motto, if you will, is everybody counts or nobody counts, and it's very clear in this world it's not attained right now, and it's about Harry trying to, at least personally, get to that level.
We have some mics going around, I believe. There's a question right here.
What a great show. My question is about the world of the books colliding with the world of the world. I mean, I noticed that show began on November during an election night in 2016, and I'm wondering how, I don't know when you shot this season, but I'm wondering how, if you're staying within the world of your books, or if you're going to be affected by what's transpiring in the world now.
No, I think the show and the books are similar. My books are very contemporary. They're set in the year that they're published, and I take what's going on in the world and try to get them into the books, and to as much a degree as we can, we do that on the show as well. It's harder to do it in the show because, like, we're filming. We start, the show that comes out at the end of this week. We were filming sequences in August, and so we're stuck with what we film, and so the election thing was kind of tricky. I'm glad they rejected my Hillary wins dialogue here, and said we might not want to risk that. I thought it was in the bag. So.
My question is for Jamie and for Lance. I assume I'm not the first crazed fan of The Wire to mention it to you. Apologies. I mean, I enjoyed a lot of Sons of Anarchy, watching you as well, Titus. But in terms of The Wire, do people bring it up? And if they do, in what context to the show? And what kind of comments would you have on that?
Wait, do you mean, do they bring it up in context of talking about this show?
Yeah, and I know that you mentioned about, playing a police officer, but, for a lot of us that were just such huge fans of The Wire, and again, apologies to everyone else on stage, but I'd seen advertisements for the show, but I wasn't geared up to watch it until I saw that you two were in it.
Oh, well, thanks, but
hopefully that was part of the plan, too.
Interestingly enough, somebody asked me that question, or similar question last night, and it actually, it takes me to something I was thinking about for an earlier question tonight. And one of the questions was kind of asking me about a comparison between, my role as Irving and my role as Daniels. And, when I thought about it, I said, well, for me, Irving is one of the most nakedly ambitious human beings I've ever played. And so he's kind of, for those of you who have seen The Wire, he's kind of the guy that Marla Daniels wanted Daniels to be in The Wire. And in terms of kind of we're talking about what makes this show unique. Somebody asked me about kind of the difference between this show and The Wire, and of course, what we talked about on the stage a lot tonight is the authenticity, and that is also true of The Wire. But I feel like the thing that is so beautiful and unique about this show is that because it's also really film noir. So it's got it's grounded in such gritty reality, and yet there's a sexiness and a romance to it. When you marry it, it's just, it's beautiful. And that's the thing that I love about the show, just watching it as a viewer.
I'm everything New York. So I go to the Knicks games and the Brooklyn Nets games, and for the first season of this show, every time I would go, people would come up to me and talk to me about The Wire. I love the show, I love the show. After the second season, I would go back and everybody would be talking about Bosch and telling me how much they love the show. In comparison to the two characters, people are just always surprised to see me out of that element as Marlo. and to Jerry Edgar, somebody that's passionate about doing the work in that area also. People really love the shows. They love the writing. And they just love the work that's being done. So they do compare it, but once they watch this show and they watch that show, they have a mutual love for both.
Speaking of authenticity, how important was it to actually shoot in Los Angeles for all of you? Los Angeles is my favorite setting, so I really appreciate that you really display all parts of LA on it.
Yeah, that's important.
Well, it was really important. I think Mike put it in the contract, right?
Wait, what did you say?
Mike put it in the contract. And we've made a real effort to shoot parts of LA that aren't usually shot. So we've had some stunning stuff, I think.
Speaking of shooting in LA, I was kind of shocked to see the two-story white Spanish house that you shot in near Beechwood Canyon because I used to live there. So that was kind of cool. And then secondly, where's the house that Bosch lives in, and how does he afford to live there on a cop's salary?
How does he afford to live in there? They actually talk about that.
I've always wondered that.
It's up above Sunset Plaza. And for those of you who saw the movie Heat, that's Amy Brenneman's house in Heat. And a little interesting tidbit that we learned from one of our producers, Peter Jan Brugge, who was a producer on that film. Rather than shoot the way that we do, which is through the glass out onto the city, Michael Mann shot plates. And it's funny because when you see the film, and I noticed this when I saw the film the very first time, it had that kind of green haze around their heads because they were standing in front of plates rather than being there. It's a hell of a journey to get up there. I mean, it's an amazing place. It's probably the most spectacular view of all of LA, and of course it works so beautifully. It's like Harry, he's this eagle in his nest observing his city. Such a great metaphor for someone who is in a constant state of observation. But getting there the streets are, it's like a gerbil's habitat. The streets are so skinny, and we have the same amount of crew people. And the first time we shot there, I remember Henrik Bast and one of our producers and I were standing in Harry's living room with a bunch of crew people and a dolly and everything. And I said, is there a weight thing? Any kind of a classification? And Henrik, in typical Henrik fashion, said, I don't know. And then of course he kicks into producer mode. He's like, maybe not everybody should be standing here that doesn't need to be standing here. But it looks amazing on film, and I have to say, and
It does.
It really serves its purpose.
There's we've explained it twice in 20 episodes, and so it gets lost, but there's one sheet on the wall, if you look closely. And so Harry could afford to buy this house because thanks to all of us in Hollywood, they made a movie out of one of his cases and paid him enough that he ended up with that house. It's got the $1 million view, but the house itself is kind of a shack.
And that's in the books, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we have time for one last question. Yes, right here in the middle.
I love the characters all three of you have created in the show. I'm enjoying the show. It's so thanks. I'm wondering though, on a long-running TV show, do you find it a challenge sometimes to stay true to your character, stay the course with all the different directors and their different styles coming in now?
No, not at all, because it's Harry is who Harry is, and he's a guy who has evolved, I think, as much as he's going to evolve to a certain degree. Here and there. I mean, obviously he's a parent, a single parent now, and she's not a little girl. she's a young woman. She's a 16-year-old girl, a teenager, and they don't come with an instruction booklet, and so that's a big challenge. So there are little things about Harry that I think that he evolves in, but he sort of stays the course. And we have a lot of the same directors. We kind of have a core of directors that come in. I mean, it's a very user-friendly environment, and it's a genuine collaboration. So it's not nobody's come in and said, "I think you need more lovers and you got to drive a Porsche," and that's not going to happen anyway. So no, in that way, it's for the hours that we put in, the joy that, and I think I can speak for all of us, the experience of making this show, with the exception of Lance, the experience of making this show is unlike any experience I've ever had, and I've had a lot of great experiences, but I genuinely wake up very early in the morning, and I'm excited and filled with great anticipation to greet the day.
Sometimes you're cranky.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, Eric would, no. We have and I think it's on the screen. We really, it's a gift, and none of us take it for granted. And obviously, we have first and foremost Michael Connelly to thank for his brilliant books. And the incredible skill of Eric as our writer, our main man and boss, cranky as he can be in the morning. And we have a phenomenal team. A great team. I mean, the writers' room is filled with really, really top shelf people, and a great cast that I get to go to work with. And we have a crew that they bust their humps, and we really are. It's a wonderful experience, and so to be able to work that hard and then put it out there in the world for people to hopefully be entertained and enjoy. So I just want to say thank you all for coming tonight. And
I just want to say one thing.
You always have to get the last word.
Well, I'm Irving, man. I mean,
see, this is what happens. He does this at work, by the way, too.
But in terms of what Titus was saying, I remember a few years ago I was talking to a showrunner, and we got into a conversation about kind of a negative experience I'd had, and he said, it only takes one asshole in terms of kind of making a set miserable. And, it starts from the top down. And, it's kind of a two-tier system. So one place it is in the writer's room. It's the producers and the showrunner. But the other place it starts is the number one on the call sheet. And because of who Titus is, it's just a joy to go to work with. So.
And if he was lying, I would tell you that he was lying, but we were working on a film, 2 weeks ago together?
Yeah.
And we went to go get dinner, and this is the exact conversation that we had about you, brother.
Thank you, brother. Man.
Get it done.
Yeah, I'm a tough guy.
I think that is the perfect note to end on. Thank you all for coming.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.